Hi, everybody. It's Jay, and I'm back in the booth with you again for another sneak peek video preview for this week's new release here on Say with Jay. This week, our new release is There I Find Wisdom. It's book 9 in Jessie Gussman's Strawberry Sands Beach Sweet Romance series, and as usual, I'll have more about the story and a live preview reading for you in just a bit. But first, as usual, it is time for another segment we like to call Cooking with Jay. Now, for those of you who don't know, Jessie, over many books lately, has been including dishes within the course of the story, and I've been cooking them for you here. Well, we wanted to do that again because Griff, the co-owner of the diner there in Strawberry Sands, is at it again, and he has come up with something really great. Today, without any further ado, let's go make some Strawberry-Rhubarb Drop Biscuits. Okay, let's take a look at our ingredients. And as always, don't worry, you're not going to have to worry about copying this down in real time. It'll be listed with the recipe in the description of the video down below. Okay, first, a bit of an explanation. This recipe, I think, certainly was made to be made with fresh strawberries and fresh rhubarb. However, while it is summertime in Strawberry Sands at the time of this book, it is not summertime here in mid-December in North Georgia. So, and to be honest, not that I ever really knew when rhubarb was in season, now ain't it. Strawberries really aren't in season either, so that's why I'm using frozen strawberries, which, by the way, work great. The rhubarb, though, was a bit more of a challenge. I honestly have seen several videos of different things being made with rhubarb using frozen rhubarb, like the strawberries here. But apparently that's not available in my area. So I went on a wild search to find rhubarb in any form. The only place I was able to find it was canned rhubarb at Walmart. So that's what I'm going to use, and as you'll see, it turned out okay. So what you're going to need is 1.25 cups of cubed rhubarb, 1/4 cup of cubed strawberries, 2 tablespoons of white sugar. For the dough, you're going to need 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 cup, 1 stick of frozen unsalted butter. So get the butter put in the freezer for a couple of hours before you plan to start this. You're going to need another 1/4 cup of white sugar. You're going to need 2 tablespoons of fruit syrup, which I'll show you in just a bit is going to come from our fruit. You're going to need 3/4 cup of buttermilk. You're going to need a large egg and 2 teaspoons of water for an egg wash. And finally, for the lemon icing, you're going to need 1/3 cup of packed powdered sugar, 1 teaspoon of finely grated lemon zest, and then 2 teaspoons of lemon juice, plus more if you need it. So the first thing you're going to want to do, about 2 hours before you're ready to get started, is to cut your rhubarb and your strawberries into 1/4-inch cubes, in other words, tiny little pieces. Once you get your pieces into a bowl together, add your 2 tablespoons of sugar, toss that to combine, and then you're going to let the fruit sit in the fridge for 1 to 2 hours. Once the fruit has been in your fridge for an hour or two, it's time to get started. First, you're going to combine your flour, your baking powder, your baking soda, and your salt in a mixing bowl. Whisk that to combine really well. Next, you're going to strain your fruit over a bowl to catch the syrup that's going to drip out. Pro tip here, please use a bigger bowl than I did. Fortunately, I didn't make too big a mess. Now, once you have your fruit drained, you want to grate your frozen butter into the flour mixture and periodically stir that with a fork to cover those butter shavings with flour and keep them all nice and separated from each other. Once you get your butter grated into the mixture, you want to add your 1/4 cup of sugar and your drained fruit, mixing with a fork until the fruit is covered with flour. Next, add 2 tablespoons of that reserved fruit juice and pour in your buttermilk. You want to mix just until the dry ingredients are incorporated into the dough. If the mixture is too dry to come together, add a little more buttermilk, and if it seems too wet and sticky, add a little bit more flour. I added some more flour here, and in retrospect, I think because I was using the canned rhubarb, probably could have even used a little bit more. At this point, you want to preheat your oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit and then line a baking sheet with some parchment paper. Scoop or spoon equal portions of dough onto that baking sheet. Next, you want to whisk together your egg and water in a small bowl, and then brush the biscuits with that egg wash and sprinkle on a bit more white sugar. You're going to bake in your preheated oven for about 25 minutes. For me, it was a bit less, about 23. Then you want to transfer those to a wire rack and let them cool completely. Now we're getting into the home stretch. You want to mix your powdered sugar, your lemon zest, and your lemon juice together in a small bowl. Finally, you want to pour that icing into a piping bag if you're fancy, or if you're not, like me, into a plastic bag. You can cut the corner off of one and it makes a perfect disposable piping bag. Then you want to drizzle that icing over the cooled biscuits. My apologies for not moving my junk out of the way in the background there. And that's all. They're not much to look at, to be honest. But truly, I don't know if I've made anything that I enjoyed this much. And folks, that's all there is to making Strawberry-Rhubarb Drop Biscuits. I'll admit I was a little intimidated by this one because there are a lot of ingredients and a lot of steps to go through. But looking back, it really wasn't that hard, and they are so absolutely delicious. They're worth trying, and I hope you will. If you do, please let us know how it goes down in the comments. All right, let's talk now a little bit about There I Find Wisdom. There I Find Wisdom is the story of Dakota Esteban. She is a former rodeo barrel racer, and she's now living in Iowa with her grandmother, who is terminally ill. And when she loses her grandmother, she loses not only her support system for herself and her 2 young girls, but she's also left without a place to live, and she doesn't really know what she's going to do. But her grandmother leaves her old souvenir shop in Strawberry Sands, Michigan. So Dakota decides to pack up her girls and go to Strawberry Sands and reopen her grandmother's shop. To do that, she has to part with her last remaining item of value, her horse, Goldie. It's also the story of Ryan Landry. Ryan is a former world champion rodeo racer, and Ryan and Dakota were once friends, but life intervenes and they're no longer friends or even in contact with each other. Can this circumstance, this series of events, bring them back together and allow them to rekindle their friendship and maybe more? Well, you know you're going to have to tune in this Friday to find out. But for now, here is a live reading from one of the opening scenes of There I Find Wisdom. I hope you'll listen, hope you enjoy it, and then come back this Friday for the full release here on Say with Jay.
Yellowstone gold is for sale.
Ryan Landry held the phone to his ear and stopped in the middle of the sidewalk as he walked down toward the beach in Strawberry Sands. Yellowstone gold, he repeated, although he had heard his friend Denver loud and clear. That was Dakota's horse, the one she'd come so close to winning a barrel racing championship on. Dakota had been a go-get-'em kind of girl, and as far as he knew, she'd gotten everything she'd ever set out for. Except for him. He'd declined her offer of marriage. She was a great friend, and it was possible he had feelings for her, probable even. He admired her as a barrel racer, but he hadn't wanted to be saddled with a wife, then possibly children, as he chased his own rodeo dreams. He would never have won the 3 championships if he'd had married her when she asked. She hadn't truly loved him or been heartbroken, since the next time he heard about her, she was married with a baby on the way. That had put the brakes on her rodeo career, and he supposed he should feel like he dodged a bullet, but he always felt like maybe she'd been the one who got away, and he'd always regret not going after her. He didn't know what happened to her, but apparently she and her horse had parted ways since Yellowstone gold was up for sale. How much? He asked, rolling over in his mind whether or not he would be able to scrape the money together to get her. He'd been saving to buy property of his own, but using his down payment to buy a horse of Yellowstone gold's quality would be a wise investment for money that had been meant for a ranch. Denver mentioned the amount. Wow, that's it?
The post is 5 minutes old. If you want her, you better move fast.
I'll take her. Do whatever you have to get her. If you can pay for her, I can wire you the money today as soon as the bank's open. He looked at the pink glow on the water. The sun hadn't quite made it up over the eastern horizon, and he was on his way to help his brother feed his horses, before he worked with 2 of the horses he was training in roping and reining. After that, he would go to the inn to help as a handyman. He had several ads out with his handyman business, offering services, but he wasn't expecting to get a lot of work here in Strawberry Sands. Which was fine by him. The more time he had to work with his horses, the sooner he could sell them, and not just make back the money he'd spent, but hopefully pocket a tiny little profit and put that much more toward his dream of owning his own ranch. It was almost a dream come true, since he saved his winnings from the rodeo. He'd had endorsements and purse money he'd won, and he was close to being able to afford the ranch of his dreams. Although it had been hard for him to admit that his rodeo days were over. He didn't want to think that he was getting older, that he would never have another championship belt, never be number 1 again, never have more accolades to add to his list. It had taken him a while after he got back to settle into the small-town routine and humble himself enough to ask the Lord if this was really what God wanted for him, and to give his life over fully to God. When he was chasing the rodeo circuit, he was sure that was what God wanted him to do, and, as a champion, that gave him a platform to point others to the Lord. But fame was fleeting, and he'd experienced that firsthand. Now, God had other things for him, and he needed to be ready, willing. and he needed to move forward with no regrets, including the fact that Dakota would never be his, and he'd most likely missed out on the woman who would have been perfect for him.
Just messaged the person who posted. She said she was selling for a friend who had a death in the family and needed to sell ASAP. As soon as I wire the money, she'll take the post down.
All right, if you don't mind doing it, I'll make sure you're refunded. He couldn't go now since he was helping his brother. Then he needed to help at the inn. Mark Shields had been doing most of the work himself, but he was planting trees today and needed Ryan's help. Ryan had given his word that he would be there. But he wasn't going to let this opportunity to own Yellowstone Gold pass by. She could be the foundation mare for his entire herd. Any man who'd been on the circuit at all would kill to have her as a part of his herd. The fact that Ryan didn't have any horses currently would make Yellowstone Gold the cornerstone on which he could build everything. He didn't have to see her to know that she was perfect. Even if she never competed again, and he guessed she wouldn't because she was well past her prime, she was the perfect mare to be put out to pasture and raise babies for him to train.
I'll let you know if anything changes,
Denver said. Then he chuckled.
I figured you'd jump on that.
Appreciate you thinking about me. Thanks, he said. They hung up, and Ryan continued down the sidewalk, whistling a little, excited. He hadn't planned on starting to build his herd this quickly, but he wasn't going to let a chance like this pass him by. With that thought, he grinned and couldn't keep the smile off his face the whole way to his brother Matt's stable. "Hey there," Matt greeted him as he stepped into the warm, cozy stable where the smell of horse hung heavy in the air. He would never get tired of that scent, never get tired of the sounds of the stable, the munching of hay, the occasional slurp from a water bucket, or the thump as a hoof hit the wall, whether impatient for its feed or kicking at flies. "Morning, bro." He paused as Matt looked up at him from where he stood in front of the calendar, writing in a feed ration for their newest horse. His riding stables had been so popular over the last year that he'd added a couple of new horses to his herd, hoping that he could keep up with the bookings of tourists over the coming season. "Do you have any plans for later today?" Ryan asked, figuring there was no point in beating around the bush. "Nothing aside from making sure the kids get on the bus and moving some hay from the upper barn down here. We're almost out." "Would you have time to run into Blueberry Beach to wire money for me?" "What did you do now?" Matt said, concern lowering his brows but a smile tugging at his lips. Ryan wasn't exactly known as a hothead, but he had done his share of crazy things over the years. "I'm buying a horse." Hi, this is Jay, and thanks for listening. If you're ready for another great audiobook, here's one we think you might like. Or check out the playlist with all our latest releases. Don't forget to subscribe to Say with Jay, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you liked in the comments.